Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for another episode, this time to talk about the roster against the Lions in tonight's game. You'll be listening to this hopefully on Monday because the material will no longer be timely. We're recording this on Sunday night. Joining me to do that is Matt Ruff. Matt, how you doing?
Doing good, Ken. Would like to see the O's young bats doing a little bit better than they're currently doing, and would like to see the Ravens roster significantly healthier than it is currently. So, feel like it's been a rough go the last week or so, but hopefully we can pull out a big win against the Lions on Monday night here.
The big news, of course, on I guess Friday and into Saturday was that Nnamdi Madubuike, who was out all 3 days of practice, which ended Saturday this week because of a Monday game, has a neck injury that has been worsening, and the description of it is probably the more menacing component rather than him just missing the Lions game. There are very various reasons why that could do, but it does not sound good. It sounds like potentially a chronic condition the way they're describing it. And Harbaugh is saying they're trying to take their time and get down to the bottom of it. It was language that I don't like to hear dancing around a explanation of an injury.
Yeah, the way Harbaugh explained it kind of sent a chill up my spine. Very non-committal. We'll wait and see. We're trying to figure out what's going on. I would, at this point, I would gladly say, hey, have him out for 6 weeks as long as we can get him back healthy, and get him back for the second half of the season or even the playoffs. But I'm worried, even though I don't have any concrete information of anything. I'm worried that this seems to be more than a small tweak, or you woke up on the wrong side of the bed. So he is one of our best players. I think he's done a really good job on defense. I think he has more pressures and sacks than the rest of the defensive linemen on the roster, and I don't think forging ahead without Madubuike for too long of a time is really going to help. Obviously, we have a very tough schedule coming up with the Lions tomorrow, with the Chiefs the next week, the Rams, and Texans don't look as tough as they used to be, but even those next three are just really tough games. So don't like how it sounded from Harbaugh, and don't like the fact that no information is getting out.
Yeah, it's scary. It's very scary the way it's been posed. There's in some ways there's no sense really discussing it more, other than it kind of reminds me of the way the Zach Orr injury just all of a sudden it was a problem he was playing with it, and if he'd taken the wrong kind of hit, it would have been terrible. But fortunately, was able to get away from the game at a time when, getting away from playing the game. He's still a coach at the right time. Other things going wrong with the Ravens this week. Van Noy pulled up lame as he was rushing the passer in the game. Apparently a hamstring injury. He's also another IR candidate. So the Ravens may make multiple moves tomorrow in advance of the games. They may have Madubuike and possibly also Van Noy going to IR. I also don't think it would be an unreasonable thing to put Patrick Ricard on IR, who's been out and hasn't practiced in over 5 weeks. So you'd think that this would be a point where they'd bite the bullet and they'd put him on IR at some point, and that'd give you a chance not to waste your roster elevations.
Yeah, it's funny when we were talking initially about the active roster. One of the things we said was it's going to be hard to find your 5 inactives, right? Because they didn't have many walking wounded. They were going mostly fresh into the season, Ricard and likely notwithstanding. But now that you have, Madubuike popping up, Van Noy popping up, Ricard's still not looking good, likely really hoping we can get him back for the next week. But, also the concussion with Rasheen Ali, although it seems like he's been back at practice. You have a lot more walking wounded than you did when you started the season. And, you really have to start getting strategic with the practice squad call-ups and, who you're gonna use, who you're gonna IR, and are they gonna start going outside of the organization to start bringing in some talent?
Right. That it certainly looks like a reasonable possibility. Likely, has been ruled out for this game. All 4 of those players have been Madubuike, Van Noy, Ricard, and likely seems like his return is imminent. Like he was practicing on a limited basis this week. Probably he'll practice full next week and be back. Would be on best guess to play against the Chiefs. A couple other people were on the injury report during the week, and these were significant concerns as far as I'm concerned. Rasheen Ali had a concussion in the last game. It actually occurred, or he was in the concussion protocol. I'm not sure if that means he had a concussion, but he was in the concussion protocol after a hit he took on the initial kickoff. But he seems to be okay. Was a full go at the end of the week in terms of practice. He's off the injury report, and by Harbaugh's language, it seems like he'll play again this week.
Yep, and what that also means, if he's going to play again, it seems like Mitchell won't be playing, which I'm not sure any of us can quite figure out at this point. But yeah, happy if Rasheen Ali can go, happy for his health, because the brain injuries, the concussions are no joke. From a roster perspective, would certainly like to see Keaton Mitchell get in there, rip some misdirection, maybe prevent Zay Flowers from having to do some of the gadgetry, and seeing if we can really unlock a piece of this offense. Look, this offense has been pretty good. I know against the Browns it was tough, but hey, the Browns just beat Green Bay today, so we know that Browns defense is good. But would love to see some of that speed in the backfield. And I agree with something that you and Voss were talking about on Friday, which is it seems like Justice Hill has maybe lost a half step here or there, and maybe he could get back to more of a special teams role and have Mitchell play more on offense. But nonetheless, here we are.
That would make a lot of sense to me. Obviously, Hill, I'm sure, has not forgotten how to play special teams and was a fine special teams player for a lot of years. And they just cut him completely out of that role last year because he was too important as the second running back. But I think that is a realistic way to move the pieces around. Marlon Humphrey suffered a groin injury on Sunday versus the Browns. He sat out at the end of the game. He was doing some kind of groin stretching on the sidelines, moving one leg back and forth in front of his other one. You could tell, what was the likely injury just from that. Nate Wiggins reportedly also had a groin injury that occurred on the interception celebration when Awuzie jumped on his back. He went down, and actually one of the Ravens players was calling over the trainers, and then he got up and he walked over to the other side of the field. So he made it back okay without needing assistance. But still, your top two corners go down in one game like that, devastating potentially.
Yeah, now's not the time for any funny business. We certainly don't need people jumping on other people, hurting each other. We don't need our top two cornerbacks getting hurt before we play the Lions and the Chiefs and the Rams. You almost have to laugh at some point, because when you start looking at a list that includes Matabike and Van Noy and Ricard and Likely and Humphrey and Wiggins, it starts to make your head spin, and starts to make me feel really nervous. I think that a team as good as the Ravens, a team that's led by Lamar, can really overcome a lot, but you can't overcome everything. So hopefully Marlon will be ready to go. Wiggins will be ready to go. And really on defense, they'll just have to be trying to work around the Matabike and Van Noy loss. I would like to think that Van Noy at his age and someone like maybe Ajabo in his fourth season would be able to put up similar production. Again, that's potentially wishful thinking, but you know what I mean? You would hope that, a young buck like Ajabo at the age of 24, 25 would be able to get more, just get up and go off the line. But it's really hard to replace the veteran savvy that Van Noy has. And he sure makes as much as possible happen with as few skill set as he has left. So, maybe we can see something from the young outside linebacker in Ajabo, but yeah, real scary when you look at this injury report.
Yeah, definitely a big reduction in defensive talent in particular. It's not like they didn't have any losses on offense because Likely and Ricard were out since the beginning, but the new ones, they're really all on the defense. And I'm not counting Ali, but Humphrey, Wiggins, Van Noy, and Matabike. And John Jenkins missed a day for a personal matter. By the way, if you saw his name on the injury report, it doesn't have any impact on Sunday, so he'll be a full go. We need to talk about the replacements, though. You briefly mentioned Ajabo there, and I think he's the only choice right now that's within the organization. It's not quite true, though. Malik Ham is on the practice squad, and they might actually feel like he gives the team a little bit more. But for right now, David Ajabo is the guy, and he'll be active, I'm sure, against the Lions.
Yeah, I really do like Malik Ham. I was actually hoping that he would make the roster and they would have found a trade partner for Ajabo. I just think Ajabo's $2+ million cap hit for the year seemed like a lot for someone who was, guaranteed to start the year and be inactive, but now's Ajabo's chance. So whether it's Ajabo, whether it's Ham, you're going to get a chance to come in and actually play some meaningful snaps. And as we've seen over the past 2 weeks, the defense isn't infallible. So maybe one of these guys can come in and bring something to the table here, because we need it. I thought Van Noy looked a little slow week 1. I say that as an accountant, right? Not someone who's measuring, get off times with a stopwatch. But I would really like to think that Ajabo, he's now years removed from the injuries. Can we see just a little bit? Goff is fairly immobile. Actually, Goff's extremely immobile. So, you're going to have a sitting duck back there. You've got to get to Goff. You don't want Goff to get the ball off to his the plethora of talent that he has out there. And so maybe one of these young guys can give us a little bit more spring than Van Noy did. But yeah, still not feeling great about that.
Yeah, we'll have to hope for the best there. When you look at Nnamdi Madubuike, now this is a loss of just, it's very difficult to exactly quantify here, but he and Travis Jones play together almost every single snap, and they're in the game on passing downs and on running downs that they play. They're in together. It's an enormous loss, and it's kind of a fortunate situation that the Ravens have a player like Aeneas Peebles. It won't completely fix things because Aeneas is really only a passing down player, but I imagine he'll play a few less downs. They won't play every single down together. And Jones will play some with Washington, maybe even some with Urban at a 3-tech. And then he'll play considerably with Peebles on passing downs. And I'm hopeful, because Peebles looked great in the first 2 games, that Peebles can continue his high proportion of pressures and make a nuisance of himself, at least in the backfield on passing plays with his penetrating style.
I think that the most difficult thing to replace with Madubuike is the number of explosive snaps he gives you per game. He gives you a ton of snaps per game, and when he plays, he gets off the line very quickly. He can penetrate, right, both on the run and on the pass. And it's through a lot of snaps. Whereas you watch someone like Washington play, the amount of disruption he gets is just a fraction of Madubuike's, and he plays a fraction of the snaps that Madubuike does. So it worries me as, you start to have some of these younger guys really hoping Peebles can step up here. But, Washington, Urban, these guys just don't have very much explosion. So your defense and your defensive line is just going to look different when you're going to be missing a player like that who eats up so many snaps a game. And oh, by the way, the Ravens defense has been on the field far too much after the first 2 weeks of the season. A lot of it's just based off the fact that the offense is basically a 2-outcome offense. It almost sounds kind of like baseball at this point. It's either a home run in 4 or 5 plays, or a strikeout in 4 or 5 plays, and they're moving on. It's not 2019 where they're doing the 12, 14, 16 play drives and just gassing the other team. Our defense is on the field a ton. And when you start going from the top tier players like Madubuike, who have the athleticism to eat up a lot of snaps, to the second and third tier players, that's where you really need to have more of a ball control offense.
Yeah. I'm with you. The offense, a lot of making the defense right is on the offense this week. And that's certainly something I hope to see. So likely, since he's out this week, I guess ZMP is going to be elevated again. It'd be his 3rd elevation, by the way, if it happens. And they can use that up, or they could just add him to the roster if they wanted to sit down Ricard at this point. That certainly could be it. They could also sit down Ricard, finally bring up a real fullback, and use ZMP more as a tight end. So they have a more traditional, for the Ravens, 3 tight ends and 1 fullback on the roster to run what I would say is their normal playbook. That's getting Andrews on the field for probably fewer snaps, which may keep him fresher. When Likely comes back, he obviously replaces ZMP directly. You can send ZMP down to the practice squad, and you still have 1 elevation left if you activate him now. So I think there's reasons to make that change now rather than later. And every week, of course, that you lose is a potential week that Ricard doesn't play at the end of the period. So if you wait too long and then you still IR him, you might lose a week out of Ricard at the end of it. So a whole bunch of, obviously a lot goes into these decisions, but there's a whole lot of maybe sunk cost thinking that goes with it. I think Harbaugh is being very reasonable when he explains it and said, the Ricard injury has taken longer to heal than we thought it would. And that's okay. And it's good that you don't become wedded to your original position that he was going to be back in 4 weeks, and then it didn't happen. And you decide to wait till the end of that to make a move. It might be time to make a move. If Ricard really can't go, it might be time to make a move and really commit to Lucas Scott in the backfield.
Yeah. Ken, from your view of Mitchell Payton, and I know no one watches the preseason games as close as you do, is Mitchell Payton someone who can really replace tight end level snaps? Does he have the ability from a route running perspective and an inline blocking perspective, in your opinion?
He's more of a replacement as a blocker than he is a replacement as a receiver. And there's nobody there's nobody out there who's going to replace likely as both a blocker and receiver. So that's not practical. And there's probably no one who's going to replace Ricard as a pure blocker. So, it's just, you're going to have to accept less, 65 or 70% of the player. And CMP might be that. He's kicked around practice squads for several years now and has a number of preseason snaps. And he's just played his first regular season snaps with the Ravens this year. So it's been a long journey to get to the NFL for him. I think he's looked okay. His big blunder, of course, that people are going to remember is that he had a false start when they were down inches from the goal line that moved him back and ended up stalling that drive. But that was right after the long pass to Hopkins that had to be reviewed to find out that he didn't score a touchdown.
Yep.
And unfortunate situation, but I don't think they could or should expect CMP to be a true replacement for Likely, but they've got no production out of tight end. That's the one of two central problems to the Ravens offense right now. They're still scored 40.5 points per game, but they haven't had good offensive line play, period. That's, full stop. They've had too many players who have already thrown in a clunker through 2 games, and Voorhees had 2. Everybody else has had 1. Okay, so you start with that, and then the second problem is the tight end play. They've only had 2 healthy guys, and then I'm going to add ZMP. We'll call it 2.5 because he would be on the roster normally. It's not not their normal depth that they had at other positions. Obviously, tight end and fullback, we were concerned about all of these contracts coming due at the same time to start the year, and I still am, but now I've got other concerns. I mean, I've got to ask the question: is it time to move on from both Ricard and Andrews at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that there are parts of the roster, or just some players that are getting old. Right, Ricard, he's got a lot of mileage, and it's not easy mileage. It's a truck that's been hauling a trailer. You know what I mean? It's not just a car that's been driving on the highway. Marlon has a lot of mileage. He didn't play corner and as a finesse corner. I still remember Marlon in a preseason game. The left tackle was coming out to block him, and he hits the left tackle as hard as he could and blows the left tackle off his feet. The announcers couldn't believe it, but your body can only take so many of those hits. And
you ever have one of those days where everything's off? Well, Mood can help with that. And let me tell you about Mood. It's the online cannabis brand that is changing the way we handle everything, from stress to sleepless nights, with functional gummies that are 100% federally legal cannabis. Mood launched to make cannabis affordable, accessible, and transparent, while at the same time supporting American farmers growing premium hemp on small pesticide-free farms. Their gummies are next level. Seriously, I've tried a few, and each one feels totally different. The Sleepy Time gummies, out like a light, immediately asleep. The Epic Euphoria, it's perfect when you just need a reset to feel good again. What makes them unique? Mood combines THC with herbs and adaptogens, so you get real targeted effects. You're not going to find this in your typical dispensary. And here's the best part. Mood ships discreetly to most states, offers a 100-day satisfaction guarantee, and right now you get 20% off your first order with the promo code RAVEN. Just head to mood.com. Find your perfect gummy and use the code RAVENS at checkout to save 20%.
Andrews is definitely looking a step slower. I mean, I think there need to be some parts of this roster that really get overhauled in the next year. I guess what I'm thinking is I understand how the Ravens have built this team, and I understand how they've done it very, very, very successfully. When I'm looking at the strength of this team on offense, it's not the offensive line, it's not the tight ends, it's Lamar and the receivers and the running backs. And what I'm thinking is, how do you lean more into that, right? How do you lean into the threat that a Tez Walker or DeAndre Hopkins poses out of your third or fourth receiver spot, right? Like there is value that you can have some sort of appreciable threat that needs to be taken care of out of someone at that level on the depth chart. Or like you were saying earlier, you have someone like Keaton Mitchell who can provide a lot of value to the offense. We need to start. I say we can't do anything except for talk to each other about this and hopefully make everyone feel better. But I think the Ravens really need to be leaning into, do we need to get more unconventional for the Ravens? Meaning we know how they've done it in the past. We know it's been successful. I don't like all the Greg Roman bashing, right? They did it a successful way. They had it. Now they've got a different set of talent on this team. And do you need to run more 11 personnel? You know, do you need to figure out a different way? Do you need to figure out a way to get Henry lighter boxes to run against? And does that include having more receivers split out wide? I'm not sure if this team is almost at an inflection point. And I think that Lamar has proven that his ability to read the pass rush is at a really high level. His ability to read the defense is at a high level, and the receivers are getting open. So I don't know. What do you think, Ken? Do you think that there may need to be a shift? I just think that there may be more value in using someone like Tez Walker or Keaton Mitchell more than using Lucas Scott or Zaire Mitchell-Payton, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I think misdirection has been a very big component of the Ravens offense whenever the run game has been successful, which has been the entire Lamar era. So if you're looking at who can provide misdirection, there's only a couple of players. Mitchell can provide it. Wester can provide it beyond the guys that are seeing time already, like Hill, like Flowers, in terms of guys who are running jet motion and taking the attention of the defense elsewhere. Mitchell to be the ultimate misdirection weapon, although Wester could become that, I suppose. He looked good in camp in terms of making some things happen after the catch. We certainly saw it on punt returns, but we also saw it on a couple of receptions that he had. I'd like to see those guys incorporated more into the offense if I had to point to it. The other thing I think that the Ravens should consider right now, whether it's time to add that 10th offensive lineman. They've had problems already on the offensive line. Depth is already a concern in terms of the guard spots. Well, okay, Dellinger is out there. Mm-hmm. You have to commit to having him on the 53 for 3 consecutive weeks, but you can go grab him from the Browns. You can sign him if he is willing to make that move. We have not got any kind of reading on whether or not Emory Jones is going to be back. I just believe with every week that passes, it becomes significantly less likely that that's actually going to happen. And even if he were to return, I think, there's some value to him being practicing and developing during the year and maybe not starting from scratch next OTA. But in truth, I mean, obviously the Ravens would do better probably to keep the extra year of team control associated with it, which is why they think that's where they would lean and get a player like Dellinger, who at least went through camp and could be in a better position to play ball if needed this year.
Yeah, certainly. I think that the offensive line weakness is a bit scary, and the up and down nature through 2 games is pretty scary. I think that I have seen George Warhop pull things together and make it better throughout the season, which we saw in his first season last year. That's a positive. The negative is we've had George Warhop all last year. Coming into this year, it seemed like the line had gotten consistently better or more consistent, I guess. And then now it seems like we're back to just complete inconsistency. And frankly, Lamar bails this offensive line out like none other. And so, a little discouraged to see that. But like you said, there's guys out there like Dellinger who you may only have another week or 2 before you can grab someone like this as the injuries start to pile up across the league. And, is that someone that they want to put on the roster I think that's something they really need to think through. Do you see?
Right.
Ken, do you see the Ravens using more wide receivers potentially to get through this tough stretch, or
Yeah.
not really changing philosophy too much?
I think they probably will. Some of it is opponent dependent, and the Lions are particularly a team that they probably want to play 11 against because they line up in a lot of man coverages.
Yes.
One of the things that Coach Derek was telling me, Coach DC, when he was on the show, was that the Lions, and he does a lot of film review of the Lions specifically. So he's the perfect know your foe guest. As it turned out, we were able to make it work. But one of the things he said is that the Lions play their base package against 11 personnel a fair amount. They're one of the few teams in the NFL that tries to do that, and they do have athletic linebackers, but they're doing it also with man coverage. And I'm like, well, the Ravens need to punish that.
Yes.
If you need to extend plays and accentuate or magnify the amount that linebacker cannot stay with a wide receiver for an extended period of time. And there should be some opportunity to do that in this game. I would see it as a game that we'll see more 11. Henry's perfectly comfortable running when he doesn't have an extra blocker in there, and they have wide receivers who can do it anyway. So you want to have Wallace on the field for 30 snaps in this game, you could do that. You want to have deal with the tight ends differently in terms of how their snaps are divided out. You could average 1.2 tight end snaps per play instead of 1.5 or 1.6, which they've been doing so far. Obviously, Andrews has not been able to keep up with that workload. Kolar has not been used in the passing game yet. So some concerns that I have about are they really getting value out of their eligible receivers?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I do think there's something to be said for, I don't think the Ravens wanted to reveal everything they had before the Lions and the Chiefs game. Or at least maybe I'm just hoping that as a fan, but I do think that there are definitely some looks out there that they could give. So I'm hoping that they have a few, not tricks up their sleeve, but just a few new components of the offense that they're rolling out. I don't want them to be tricks. I want it to be ass-kicking packages and plays that are something that they can repeatedly run going forward here.
I mean, the one to pick out of that, Keaton Mitchell, would be the what the hell are they going to do with him thing. He's the player that keeps the opposing defensive coordinator up nights if they have him in the game. So anyway, let's move on. Talk about inactives for this game, because we're presuming that they're going to make two moves, and I think it's extremely likely this will happen, that there'll be an elevation of ZMP for the third time and an elevation of Urban. And it could even be those guys are both on the roster as of tomorrow with two IR moves made. If Madubuike were to go to IR, then Urban would be the obvious guy that I think that they would call up. But I think those two will be active. And that means that pulls them up to 55. They have to get down to 48. So they'll have 7 inactives. I presume the 7 inactives, if they do it by the elevation method, will be likely Ricard, Vincent, and Madubuike, who've already, all 4 of those guys have been ruled out. And then I'll throw 3 additional names. The language around Mitchell still seems to be very negative. And Harbaugh said, "We just don't have a spot for him now," was the quote from him at the end. Unless he's really going to the ultimate level of gamesmanship, which I don't think he'd do over this move. I think that really means Mitchell's not going to play. He's really preparing the writers and fans for the notion that Mitchell is not going to play.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I've seen the Ravens play players who have far less talent than Keaton Mitchell. I mean, Keaton Mitchell? This is the same Keaton Mitchell we're talking about, who was ripping runs left and right 2 years ago and just looked absolutely bionic. And then, okay, he had his injury, took longer to come back from, right? I think maybe some of us were more realistic about the fact that we knew he wasn't going to be shot out of a cannon last year, right? That injury is horrific, was going to take some time. But like you said, he came back this preseason and in training camp was really the one on the field who stood out the most, above the rest. Again, a lot of starters weren't playing, but he really stood out amongst the rest. Just struggling to understand why he wouldn't be in there. I get that maybe he's not the perfect special teams player, but at some point in time, you'd like to have him on there. And I wonder if, do you really need to have all of like the inside linebackers active. I know they're all core special teamers, right? The Hummels, the Wiggins of the world, et cetera.
Higgins, yeah.
Higgins. But at some point in time, how much would we benefit from 15 snaps of Keaton Mitchell, even if he only touches the ball 6 times?
That's the real question, because you got 8 special team snaps, and I'm talking about the first game, because the second game Ali was hurt. But he had 8 special team snaps to go with 1 snap in the backfield where he actually carried the ball out in a pony look. So if the kickoff return snaps they're going to play are going to be the same. So that's aside from the 8 other special team snaps. So the kickoff return snaps, we think Mitchell might be a little bit better. The running back snaps, I know I'm confident he'd be better than Ali. I'm confident he's a more dangerous player who gives you a lot more bang for your buck. And if the other team's thinking about him, that's the best evidence I can give you of that. And the third thing is how you get those special teams snaps back from Ali. And it's a slight downgrade. But again, I look to Justice Hill and I say, hey, Justice, can you play 8 snaps of special teams for us? Is a very reasonable request. And honestly, I think Mitchell probably ends up taking some of Hill's snaps, because he's not playing as well as he has. And I think that's where you get Mitchell up to 10 or 12 snaps maybe for the game by doing that, at least initially. Who knows? I mean, Keaton Mitchell could end up being a very significant component of the offense at some point this year under certain nuclear scenarios. So it's not hard to imagine that he'd be out there.
Do you put much stock into the rumors of him having some sort of foot injury towards the end of camp? I know they ran him pretty hard for a period of time, and then we never saw him again. What do you think?
He had some sort of minor injury that supposedly minor injury that came out. Yes. I don't believe he was on he missed practice for very long. He might have missed a day or 2 of practice. I'm trying to remember what it was, but then he was back at practice and practicing full. He hasn't been on any injury reports. He's a healthy scratch, just like David Ajabo.
Right.
It's not, they really can't find a place for him. I think is the Occam's razor solution to this that is just still very frustrating to people who like Keaton Mitchell.
Yep.
All right, let's get to the end of this because there's a couple more players. Carson Vincent will be inactive, I would assume, and I don't expect him to be active the entire year. It's not impossible that he would, but that's a story for another day. And then there's one more inactive to be had, and I think it's got to be Jair Alexander again. Now Harbaugh has used different language, I think, to try and muddle the waters or whatever, make it unclear exactly who's going to be playing. And he said it'll be sooner rather than later for Alexander. But I still think that may mean next week. So he played a game, wasn't right, missed 2 games. And the wasn't right, he's also a healthy scratch for 2 weeks. Make no mistakes about it. I don't like even defining football shape in this. I just don't think he's playing good football now. I think that's really the problem. His problem is more like what Eddie Jackson and Marcus Williams had last year, as opposed to he's got some injury that he's not fully recovered from. And that's honestly, it's been very unusual for Alexander, who has been on the field for only about half the games the last 4 years, but when he's been on the field, it's been terrific.
Yeah, he really has been. Even didn't matter how many games he missed in the past, he would come in and he would play at a very high level. What scares me is if I'm looking at this cornerback room, okay, Nate Wiggins was jumped on and got hurt. Marlon got hurt. He has a history of injuries hitting him. You have Jair, who has a ton of injury history. You have Chidobe Awuzie, ton of injuries. You have TJ Tampa, who missed a decent chunk of last year in the preseason with injury. And when you think about it, this is a room that just really doesn't have a history of being healthy. I almost wonder if Alexander may play just because you have Marlon and Wiggins banged up. Maybe they're playing, but I don't think you would say they're 100% healthy. And I think that being low on corners against Detroit is a really bad place to be. But to your point, Ken, you're trying to find these inactives, and it's not always easy.
Well, there we are. So those are my 7 inactives anyway with Alexander. I guess if they wanted Alexander to play, they could sit Lowry again. They have other options, but the defense honestly is getting pretty tight in terms of the people who are healthy really need to be in there. So getting fewer options for having walking wounded on the 53. I am expecting moves tomorrow to be made, whether it's IR. I think the Monday night elevations are not required until later than the Sunday elevations, which for a 1:00 game are required the night before. But yes. I believe it's for the Monday night game, they're only required same day, and I'm not sure the exact time. So we'll find out a little later today, and then of course we'll find the inactive list sometime slightly before 7:00, around 6:50 or 6:45.
Right. And another thing to consider is quick turnaround this week. Right, we're playing on Monday. You got to play the Chiefs at 4:25 I believe, next week,
and on the road. So that's a traveling after a short week is not a good combination. It's not a good. This is a tight scheduling spot for the Ravens, and
very
ideally they'll win the game against the Chiefs, and some of that will be dependent on who the Chiefs really are, which I don't think we know yet after 2 close losses. But if the Chiefs are not as good as they have been in the past, which would be really a great break. That would help a lot, but they've got to win at least 2 of these next 4 ball games. And Houston looked terrible again today, so that might be a pretty good chance for a win. It's at home, so it certainly should be from that perspective. The Rams blew a big lead against the Eagles, so they certainly know how to bake a game that they have won, and that looked good. But the Chiefs and Lions both look like very tough matchups, and this is no easy 4-game stretch for the Ravens. We knew it would be. We knew it'd be difficult to try and win, going 4-2 in these games. And right now, I think with all their injuries right now, if they went 3-3 and they beat the Chiefs, I'd be very happy with that. I'd be solid that they would still compete for the number 2 seed in the AFC, and have a very good chance to get there.
Yeah, and if you don't do well enough in this first 5-game stretch, it may come down to looking to win the division. So Steelers won today. Again, Browns beat the Packers. You didn't hear that wrong. They beat them 13-10 and really kicked their butt, which, the Packers couldn't run on them. Makes me feel better about the Ravens not being able to run on them last week. But Bengals got blown out by Carson Wentz and the Vikings. But, tough stretch. But you could very quickly lose ground against the Bills. The Bills have a cupcake schedule, and there's several good teams on the AFC side. So more to come.
Yeah, I think it is unlikely at this point that the Ravens can catch the Bills for the 1 seed. It's the difference between the 1 and the 2 seed is large. The difference between the 2 and the 3 seed is also very large.
Yes,
it guarantees you a second game at home to get that 2 seed. You have to win, but it guarantees you that your second game will be at home. All right, Matt, always great talking football with you. Tell folks where they can reach you online.
Yeah, you can find me at 20 Kid Rock on Twitter.
All right, outstanding. Other folks out there, thanks for listening. All the loyalty has been absolutely great. Show one more person this pod or the website if you would, and take a look outside. Take a look out on the website for what's new, and I'm going to try and respond to comments in a more timely fashion out there if you want to comment in particular on the articles. Thanks for listening in, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.